he will be speaking to us on the archaeology of massacre sites, as soon as I find his PowerPoint presentation, and intangible heritage. Darran currently works with ACOM, large engineering company that you may be aware of. And please give Darran a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by recognising the traditional owners of this land, Aboriginal elders past and present, and all those who have died as a result of conflict and massacre across Australia. The topic of massacre sites in Australia is extensive, and this presentation has very specific limitations, which are to examine the way in which massacre sites have been documented in New South Wales through the Aboriginal Heritage Information Management System, or AHIMS as the acronym by which it is often referred. The first step when undertaking an archaeological assessment of a proposed development area is to undertake a search of the AHIMS database to see what registered Aboriginal archaeological sites occur within the bounds of the proposed development area. The cultural and scientific significance, as well as the physical extent and integrity of a site, are major factors in informing archaeological recommendations. In the AHIMS database, use of the term massacre was inherited from the time when the New South Wales Register of Aboriginal Sites was administered by the Australian Museum. The earlier site cards referring to massacre stem from this period and date to the 1970s. In 1990, Elizabeth Rich undertook a management study of historic Aboriginal sites located in northeast New South Wales for National Parks and Wildlife Service and the Australian Heritage Commission. The focus was on historic Aboriginal sites, including such site types as contact, mission, massacre, reserve, station and cemetery. She created her own site categories, as instead of massacre sites, she divided the locations under such headings as tribal battles, of which there were 8, Aborigines killed sites, of which there were 4, Aborigines massacred sites, 38, Whites killed sites, 26, Whites massacred sites, 3, and warfare structure sites, 5. Rich recommended that if new legislation were adopted, the definition of an Aboriginal site should be amended to include cultural heritage items reported in literature or by Aboriginal people, and that sites without any apparent physical remains, but which had been identified by literature references or by Aboriginal people, should be registered and protected. She stated that it was essential that Aboriginal historic sites be included in archaeological studies carried out for environmental impact studies and planning studies, as, to quote, Aboriginal people did not generally differentiate between historic and prehistoric sites, and archaeologists rarely identify Aboriginal historic sites, and so often do not consider the impact which development has on them. In the year 2000, the list of registered sites came under the auspices of the National Parks and Wildlife Service of New South Wales. In 2001, the site type categories that defined the registered sites were converted to a new system, focusing on site features, and a corresponding site card was developed. The previous practice had been for recorders to describe a site, such as midden with shelter and potential archaeological deposit. Each such description was then input into the register as a new site type, leading to the registration of 36 different site types, many of which were composed of varied feature combinations. The separation of site features in 2001 was an approach that allowed for many combinations of site features within a single site recording, without having to create new site types for each combination. This resulted in the official identification of a total of 20 site features. In 2007, an internal AHIMS operation and training manual was published by DEC, who were then administering to the AHIMS register. The manual referred to the rules for determining new site categories and how to convert sites registered under the old site types to the new system, focusing on the list of 20 identified site features. In the training manual, it was stated that the site type massacre was to be converted to the site feature conflict. The definitions of site features were compiled in an internal AHIMS document. The definition for the site feature conflict in the 2012 version of this document is listed as, to quote, previously referred to as massacre sites where confrontations occurred between 1, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, or 2, between different Aboriginal groups. As of the 30th of March 2012, a search of the AHIMS register identifies 47 sites in New South Wales with the keyword massacre in the site name. A search under the site feature conflict identifies 67 types. A total of 72 sites were identified for this paper, combining word searches with the site feature search. In addition to the 67 conflict sites, there are 3 sites listed under site feature burial that refer to massacres, 1 massacre site listed under the site feature Aboriginal resource and gathering, and 1 massacre site mistakenly listed under the site feature modified tree. Of the 67 conflict sites, there are 8 that do not have site cards on file, and 10 with site cards unavailable due to restricted access. Missing site cards are a major issue with the AHIMS database. The AHIMS system was originally a hard copy one with site cards filled in or filed in a compactus at the Hurstville office for OEH. I was informed by AHIMS staff that all the site cards that were in the Hurstville compactus have been digitised and are now available. The problem with the hard copy compactus arrangement was that site cards used to go missing regularly, as consultants apparently came in and misfiled them or simply took them. There is currently no program with AHIMS to replace missing site cards with updated recordings. For the 8 massacre site cards that are missing from the current AHIMS system, the only available information to the researcher is the name of the site and a coordinate. Site coordinates are also an issue with AHIMS registered sites. The registration of a site in AHIMS requires that it be attached to a single site coordinate. The coordinate provided on the site card submitted to AHIMS is then manually entered by AHIMS staff into a database and becomes the trigger by which a site is identified in an area search. Human error is one factor that has led to numbers being incorrectly transcribed from the site card into AHIMS. Another factor to be considered is the changing technologies and methods of recording. The earliest site cards contain map grid coordinates, many of which were estimated from topographic maps and rounded to the nearest 1,000 metres. These map grid coordinates have since been converted in-house by AHIMS staff into either AMG or GDA datum coordinates, something done without any further inspection of the site area. The registration of a single coordinate to represent a site is also a major issue, since many sites occur across a wide geographical area. Site features such as artefact scatters can occur on the surface across a large area, with potential subsurface deposits often representing a larger area again. The reduction of a site to a single coordinate is misleading and has the potential to endanger sites, since it does not adequately describe their spatial extent. In the case of the Rufus Creek massacre site, the initial site card was recorded in 1976, but was appended in 1983 when archaeologist Anne Bickford was commissioned to further assess it. Based on a review of available historical sources, Bickford concluded, to quote, "There were several massacres around the Rufus River. In some, Aborigines killed Europeans, in some, Europeans killed Aborigines, and in others, killings occurred on both sides." To further quote, she stated, "This is a place where several massacres took place in the space of 5 or so years, and there is often confusion as to which massacre people are talking about. I tend to think they have all been mixed up in people's minds." The reduction of multiple conflict events into a single place and event is an issue with multiple massacre sites recorded in the AHIMS database. In the 2004 Dennis Byrne and Maria Nugent study, Mapping Attachment, a key theme was the exploration of landscape rather than focusing on site-specific areas, with the authors stating, "The concept of sites is not sufficient for representing, reflecting and recording Aboriginal post-contact cultural heritage." When discussing massacre sites, they referred to the uniquely difficult problem for heritage practitioners of locating the site of the incident with any exactitude, as most locations are known in a very general way, for instance, as having occurred somewhere along a certain river or creek. Five AHIMS massacre sites were registered in 1976, the first of which was the Wentworth massacre site. At the time the site area was inspected, a number of skeletons had been exposed due to shifting and eroding sands. Oral testimony from an Aboriginal leader from Balranald stated her belief that the area was a massacre site, as she, to quote from the site card, was told of a massacre which took place in Wentworth before the turn of the century. She does not know the exact location of the massacre site, but claims that this site is the actual massacre site because of the disorganised burials. Additional work followed, with mapping in 1981, a photographic record in 1983, and a paper written by Peter Clark and Jeanette Hope in 1985, containing the results of radiocarbon dating for the site, as well as further historic and ethnographic information. Referred to as the Snaggy Bend Aboriginal Burial Ground by Clark and Hope, they stated, to quote, "The Snaggy Bend sandhill was used as a burial ground from about 10,000 years ago until historic times, and is unlikely to be a massacre site." They detail the area as having been used as a mission between 1855 and 1866, and a European graveyard dating to the 1850s. The first Aboriginal burials to erode from the site were recorded between 1950 and 1955. Hearths, shell middens and artefact scatters were described in the 1985 report as being present across the area. Flake bottle glass was also recorded by Clark and Hope, suggesting ongoing use of the area into the contact period. There is nothing in the mapping, photographic evidence or 1985 paper that suggests that this is a massacre site. Rather, the evidence is interpreted as being a complex long-term habitation area with associated burials. Despite the 1985 paper and archaeological findings, however, this site remains classified in the AHIMS database as a conflict site, and the site card does not contain any of the additional data from the Clark and Hope paper. Additional to this, there are two site card components that contradict the Clark and Hope data. Firstly, there is a handwritten addition to the site card attributed to Carroll, stating that bullet shells, battens from police jackets and beads were present at the site. Apart from this handwritten note, none of the other information about the site describes any such material present. The site mapping, recording and findings from Clark and Hope do not contain any data to support this, and it is uncertain who wrote it, when or why, as it seems to contradict all other data associated with the site. Secondly, the site card contains additional pages stating that a consent to destroy permit was granted for the site in 1990, with associated salvage archaeology undertaken by K.M. Sullivan. The page stating this has illegible coordinates, so it is not possible to